I speak to you in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Friends, the title of my sermon this morning is Cheetos and Other Terrible Temptations. This is the fifth in our sermon series on the habits of the heart that block the work of grace in our lives, and it's the second on those habits of the heart that are fundamentally driven by fear. Now, some of you may know this about me, many of you probably don't, but I love to cook. I really love to cook. Pretty much anything. Mexican, Thai, Vietnamese, Indian, French, Greek, Italian. You never know what you're going to get when you come to my house. So when I ask you, if you're coming to my house, if there's really anything you won't eat, that may not do you a whole lot of good, because I really like to cook, and I almost never know what I'm going to cook until the day before the dinner party or the engagement. But there is one food that I cannot have in my house. I just cannot have it. If it's there, it sits in the pantry and it calls my name, and I am helpless to resist it. Guess what it is? Cheetos. Yeah. Baked or fried, it doesn't matter. If there's a bag of Cheetos in the house, I will eat the whole thing all at once. And once I start, I cannot stop. Now, Father Fred is completely amazed why anyone who loves to cook as much as I do will eat the most plastic-tasting nuclear orange snack food on the market is completely beyond him. He doesn't like Cheetos. But for me, Cheetos. One is never enough. 10 are never enough. It's best just to avoid them altogether. Temptation has a name in my world, and its name is Cheetos. I eat Cheetos until I'm full, and then I keep on eating them. I know that they apply themselves to my body like glue, and they make me rounder and much fuller of figure than I need to be. But in the middle of a bag of Cheetos, I don't care. I just want more. I eat Cheetos well past the point of satiation and need. I just keep on eating. And since a bag of Cheetos is more calories than a woman my age should ever eat in a day, the whole day becomes a nutritional wasteland. It was Cheetos that taught me the true meaning of the habit of the heart of gluttony. Gluttony is the consumption of anything, food or anything else, well past the point of satiation or need. Gluttony is unbridled consumption. It is intemperance. It's not just about food. And it is a serious spiritual problem. Gluttony is another one of those problematic habits of the heart that we don't talk about very much in our supersize me culture. I mean, how could we? It's a culture that finds its meaning in what people consume. So we can hardly acknowledge that unlimited consumption might not be the very best thing for us. When every single commercial we see is about bigger and faster and better and more. When we use slogans like he or she who dies with the most toys wins. When our economic health is gauged by consumer spending, how can we possibly look at overconsumption as a problem? Now, please hear me. I'm not about to launch into a sermon on the evils of capitalism or the modern economy. We are talking about a habit of the heart that blocks God's grace in your life and mine. Let me give you another example that doesn't have anything to do with food. Back in the day when it was still on, I watched exactly one episode of Sex and the City. After that, I decided I had better things to do with my time, and it was bad for my soul. But anyway, in the single episode that I was watching, the Sarah Jessica Parker character was looking for a new apartment because she could no longer afford her old one. She needed an apartment in Manhattan with more closet space and for less money than she was already paying. Fat chance. But the point was, why did she need the apartment? She had a storage problem. She had more than 100 pairs of shoes. Manolo Blahnik shoes, to be precise, and she needed a closet in which to store all those shoes. Now, this character's fascination with this particular form of shoe made it very popular for a long time in the late 90s and early 2000s, but I think the pandemic has put a forever crimp in the market for 4-inch heels. But at one point in the show, anyhow, one of the other characters pointed out to her that at an average cost of $400 a pair, she had over $40,000 invested in the shoes in her closet. That was enough to have made a down payment on a condominium or to have continued to afford her old apartment. It's a perfect example of consumption beyond all satiation and need. And it is an example of gluttony. So besides financial recklessness or endangering our health through obesity, what's the spiritual problem with gluttony? The fundamental problem with gluttony is not the desire for food or things. The fundamental problem here is a fear of pain, any physical or psychological pain. And where avarice, which we talked about Sunday before last, accumulates things on the outside to build a fortress against this chronic sort of fear, gluttony consumes as a way of making a fortress for the self. It is another way of saying, there is nothing that will make me feel full. There's nothing else that will make me so happy. There is nothing else that can make me so safe. The glutton makes little effort to control consumption because of the deep-seated conviction that consuming more will fill that gnawing interior void that is a continual presence in them and makes them afraid. Fundamentally, the struggle with gluttony or intemperance is rooted in this fear of any sort of pain. It's as though somewhere deep inside, those of us who struggle with this habit of the heart cannot handle the pain that accompanies everyday life. And so we consume in order to keep the pain at bay. And this is a form of idolatry. Nothing and no one becomes more important to us than whatever we use to keep that pain at bay. We use whatever we consume to hide from pain and ultimately from God. At its heart, it is a refusal to believe that God can satisfy our deepest needs and longings. And instead, it takes the good gifts and the blessings of God, and it makes them into something that is larger in our lives than God himself. That's why gluttony is a spiritual problem. It makes something other than God the most important thing in life. And that's why St. Paul always mentions it when he talks about spiritual trials that keep us from God. It's a subtle problem, and it is a human problem. And the terrible trap here is that someone with this habit of the heart is constantly disappointed. They anticipate eating all of that food or buying all of the shoes, and it makes them believe that they will be so happy when they've done so. But they're not. Nothing ever quite lives up to the anticipation. And so there's this horrific cycle in the middle of all of it. I anticipate that I will finally feel good and safe if I buy shoes or I eat this food, if I have one more donut or I consume things, but the food and the shoes never satisfy. And I still feel empty and I still feel disappointed. But the next time that I'm faced with food or other things that I've turned into my talismans, I'm convinced that this time they will meet my needs, and the whole cycle starts again. Gluttons don't have to be fat. That character that Sarah Jessica Parker played in Sex and the City ate almost nothing. She bought shoes instead of eating. But then food or shoes, or the very latest phone, or the very latest tech gadgets that are all supposed to work and keep me feeling good about myself, they don't work this time. Maybe it'll work next time. And so when you struggle with this habit of the heart, you run from the dark things that you're afraid of, and most of all, you run from the idea that your needs will not be met, and you try and fill that empty, unmet need with food or other things, but nothing ever satisfies. A person who lives with this habit of the heart will not commit to very much except to the idol that they've chosen. They find it hard to cling to the promises of God, and even harder to believe that struggling with God will not mean pain. And what they're sure of, somewhere deep down inside, is that anything that leads to struggle and pain cannot have any reward or anything good on the other side. Now, there is a spiritual practice that helps to heal this habit of the heart. It's one that always, it's one of two. I said this to the Sunday school class this morning. It's one of two that always upsets people when you preach about them. The first one, which I'm not preaching about this morning, is confession. It always upsets people. But this is the second one, fasting. It always amazes me how many people insist to me that no, they don't have any health problems, but they couldn't possibly fast, or they won't consider fasting. And if your reaction to the idea of fasting is to worry about how you can't stand to be hungry for a few hours, then that is really worth thinking about. As I said, one of the habits of this hallmarks of this habit of the heart is a deep fear of discomfort. And I've often had the experience the first time that I speak to directees or to parishioners about fasting, that they look at me and they go, but how will I stand to be hungry? But fasting does attack this spiritual problem. And it attacks it because at its heart, fasting is about emptying ourselves and our lives and making a space for God. And it is about struggling with God and finding that God is actually there in the midst of it. You know, if we've struggled with all these other alternatives, and they've always proven unsuccessful and unsatisfying, why not try God? Why not try a practice that the Christian tradition has known since the beginning, and actually something Jesus instructs us to do, that will make it better, that will help us find God? You know, sometimes fasting may mean not watching 4 or 5 hours of television in an evening. It may mean cleaning out your closets and getting rid of all the stuff you're hoarding in there, like maybe 80 of your 100 pairs of shoes, or the clothes you've had for 15 years. Or it can look like staying off the internet for days or weeks at a time. What do you consume that you use to block your fear and avoid God? But I will say this. Fasting from food is particularly important. First, because God and Jesus command us to fast and pray for our own spiritual well-being as well as in times of crisis. It's not actually an optional spiritual discipline. The second reason that fasting from food is important is because it tends to focus us on our bodies and reminding us that being human is about being a creature with a body and a soul, and that our life cannot be entirely lived from our chin to the top of our head. Ironically, those who struggle with a habit of the heart of gluttony are often disconnected from their bodies and inclined to want to live from here to here. So fasting helps to reconnect the body and the soul. And since the void that people who struggle with gluttony as a habit of the heart feel is psychological and not actually physical, the connection between the body and the soul must constantly be reestablished. The third thing about fasting is it creates a vacancy for God. And if you consciously ask God to come and fill that vacancy, God will be present. And the grace of God will help you reorient your life to fill the empty feeling and to stop filling it with food or other things that you hope will bring you consolation. Now, with all of these habits of the heart, there has always been something, a virtue that goes with them. And the particular virtue of this habit of the heart, when someone has worked hard enough to get honest with themselves about what they're doing, is joy. I don't mean some sort of giddy life of the party, happiness, but it's the kind of joy that shines out of you and makes other people want to be near you and to know where you found such joy and delight. If it helps, think of St. Francis and not of Jim Carrey. Joy is a gift to all the world. And the world needs more people who know true joy. The kind of joy that only those who have been redeemed from the habit of the heart of gluttony can bring to us. It is a joy that delights in the pleasures and blessings of God. And it sees the good things that surround us, and it helps the rest of us see how good they are and how good all of God's creation is. It's not easy. It's not magic. But Christ desires that we all be healed from these habits of the heart. And when we have been healed, when we have offered ourselves for that healing, we bring things into the world that the world desperately needs. In this case, we bring joy. Amen.